Before we even get into this, I would like you to do me a favor. Subscribe to this channel, and I promise you that this will be the very best investment you make in your self-development journey. Welcome to the High Figure Podcast. Most people know the clips, the luxury cars, the billionaires, the fast interviews, the viral moments, but very few people actually know the person behind the microphone, James DuMoulin. Why and how on earth is a young man in his 20s able to wake up and walk up to powerful people, speak with confidence, build relationships, and create one of the most recognizable street interview brands on the internet? And maybe the bigger question is this: what kind of mindset creates a person like that? Because the truth is this: James didn't just accidentally become successful. His life reveals a pattern, a way of thinking, a level of obsession, and a kind of courage that most people never develop. This documentary is not about the School of Hard Knocks. That platform simply introduced him to the world. This is about the personality behind it, the psychology, the ambition, the discipline, the hunger, and the young man who turned curiosity into influence. This is the story of James DuMoulin, entrepreneur and media creator. Before the interviews, before the influence, James was just a kid growing up in a military family. And that matters more than most people realize, because your environment shapes your psychology long before you become successful. James was born in Virginia in 2002. His father served in the US Army and reportedly helped oversee one of the biggest and the largest overseas military base in the world. That meant structure, discipline, movement, responsibility. This was not an environment where excuses survived. And as a child, James spent years living in South Korea. Most children grow up inside one environment, one culture, one worldview, but James experienced something different very early in life. He saw how different people lived, how different people communicated, and how different culture operated. And when you experience that as a child, you naturally become more observant, more curious. You start asking questions, you start paying attention, and one thing becomes clear when studying James: curiosity has always been part of his identity. Even before the business, even before the content, James and his brother Jack were highly competitive growing up. They played baseball seriously. James earned a black belt in Taekwondo. This was a family built around discipline and achievement. His brother became an Eagle Scout. But there's another detail that matters. James did not come from a wealthy entrepreneurial background. Nobody handed him a roadmap to becoming rich. Nobody taught him how to build a media company. Nobody showed him how to create influence online. Which means most of what he eventually became, he had to teach himself. And people who teach themselves how to win often become extremely dangerous because they stop waiting for permission. One thing you notice about successful people is this: most of them reach a point where ordinary life stops feeling in love. Not because they are ungrateful, but because they can feel their potential pulling them towards something bigger. For James, that period started during his teenage years. Before the School of Hard Knocks, he worked normal jobs. He worked at Chick-fil-A. At one point, he reportedly worked multiple jobs at the same time, and the pay wasn't impressive. This part of the story matters because people love studying successful people after success arrives. But the real transformation usually happens before anybody notices them. There's always a period where a person quietly decides, I cannot stay average. And James appears to have made that decision early. Not emotionally, strategically. He started paying attention to the internet, not just entertainment, attention. And that's the point. A lot of people consume content. Very few study why content works. James started understanding something extremely important in the modern world. Attention is power. If you can capture attention, you can build influence. If you can build influence, you can create opportunity. And if you can create opportunity consistently, you can completely change your life. That realization changed the direction of his future. He started experimenting with content, learning social media, testing ideas, posting, failing, adjusting, trying again. At one point, he built a TikTok account to hundreds of thousands of followers. But even then, something deeper was happening. James wasn't just trying to go viral. He was studying people, human behavior, psychology. What makes someone stop scrolling? What makes someone listen? What makes people trust you? Those questions later became the foundation of everything he built. In 2000, James moved to Austin, Texas, and enrolled at the University of Texas. On paper, his life looked normal. College student, young guy, future uncertain. But internally, his mindset was changing fast because James was beginning to realize something that many ambitious people eventually realize. Traditional education alone was never going to satisfy him. Not because education is useless, but because he wanted direct access to people actually living the lives he admired. He didn't want theories, but about success. He wanted proximity to successful people. He wanted to understand how wealthy people understand things, how they think, how entrepreneurs make decisions, how high performers operate. And this is where James becomes interesting psychologically. James approached them. The difference changed his entire life. In 2021, alongside his brother Jack and childhood friend Joshua Smith, James co-founded the School of Hard Knocks. But here's what people misunderstand. The interviews were never just interviews. They were a networking system, a learning system, a relationship building system, and most importantly, a confidence building system. Because think about what James was training himself to do. Walk up to strangers, approach wealthy people, speak confidently, handle rejection, stay composed under pressure, do it again tomorrow. Most people cannot emotionally survive repeated rejection, but James trained himself to become comfortable with it. And that alone separates him from most people. If you really study James, you'll realize this. His greatest skill may not actually be content creation. It may be communication. More specifically, his ability to make people talk. And that's a superpower. Because powerful people are constantly surrounded by fake energy. People trying to impress them, use them, take from them. But James approached conversations differently. He came with curiosity, energy, respect, and genuine interest. That combination makes people comfortable around him. That's why viewers started seeing him interview artists, entrepreneurs, celebrities, and millionaires. But underneath the viral clips is something deeper. James was collecting patterns. How do successful people think? What habits do they repeat? How do they approach risk, failure, money, discipline, confidence? And eventually, audiences became addicted to the answers because people are searching for direction, especially young people. They want to know, how do I escape average? How do I build something meaningful? How do I become successful? And James built a platform around publicly asking those questions. That's why his content spread so aggressively online. It wasn't just entertainment, it was aspiration, hope, possibility. A young person watching one of his interviews could suddenly feel, maybe I can do something bigger with my life too. And that emotional reaction is powerful. One of the most important things James teaches, directly and indirectly, is the importance of action. He once said, most people are addicted to learning but allergic to doing. That sentence explains a lot about him, because James belongs to a generation that understands speed. The internet rewards execution. People spend years planning, researching, overthinking, waiting. James built his life by moving, trying, testing, adapting, and continuing. That mindset helped him do things most young people never attempt. Cold emailing successful people, cold approaching wealthy strangers, networking aggressively, creating opportunities instead of waiting for them. And eventually, something important happened. The interviews became relationships, the relationships became assets, the assets became opportunity, and the opportunity became wealth. That's when you realize James was never just building content. He was building a network, a reputation, a brand. And in today's world, that can become more valuable than traditional credentials. One thing that becomes clear when you study James DuMoulin is that success changed the speed of his life very early. And that affects a person psychologically. Most people in their early 20s are still trying to figure themselves out slowly, but James is building relationships with millionaires, traveling, growing a media company, studying algorithms, managing attention, and constantly thinking about expansion while still very young. Mind you, he is only 23 years as at 2026. That kind of lifestyle changes the way a person thinks. You begin to value time differently. You become more intentional about opportunities. You start thinking in terms of leverage, relationships, reach, and long-term positioning. And for someone like James, growth appears to have become part of his identity. Not growth because it sounds motivational, actual growth. Learning faster, moving faster, building faster, improving communication, expanding networks, understanding people better. One thing you notice from his interviews and the way he operates is that he seems obsessed with progress. Not in a loud way, in a strategic way. And many ambitious people relate to that mindset. Because once you start seeing results from your efforts, your brain changes. You stop seeing life as something that just happens to you. You start seeing it as something you can shape. That mindset is powerful, but it also creates pressure. Because highly driven people rarely feel satisfied for long. Every achievement quickly becomes normal. Then the mind moves to the next target, the next level, the next opportunity. And that seems to be one of the biggest characteristics of James. He is constantly trying to evolve, not just financially, mentally, socially, strategically. There's a reason millions of people watch James DuMoulin, and it's bigger than luxury cars or celebrity interviews. People connect with him because he represents possibility. He represents a generation realizing that the old rules have changed, that a young person with a phone, confidence, communication skills, and consistency can build a global brand. That networking matters. That curiosity matters. That courage matters. And maybe, most importantly, that action matters. James built his entire life by stepping into rooms most people are too intimidated to enter, approaching people most are afraid to approach, starting before he felt ready, and repeatedly betting on himself. That mindset inspires people because deep down, many people already know what they should do. They are just afraid to act. But James became successful partly because he trained himself to move despite fear. And that lesson applies far beyond business. It applies to life itself. James DuMoulin's story is not really about social media or interviews or even business. At its core is a story about belief. Believe that conversations can change your life. Believe that confidence can be built. Believe that access can be earned. Believe that ordinary people can create extraordinary futures if they are willing to take action consistently. From a military childhood to hourly jobs, to building one of the internet's most recognizable interview platforms, James transformed curiosity into influence and influence into opportunity. But maybe the most important lesson from his life is this: success usually begins long before the world notices you. It begins in private. When a person decides they want more from life, when they stop waiting, when they stop hesitating, when they stop watching other people win, and finally start moving themselves. And for James, that decision changed everything. If you did love this documentary on James, do like this interview, subscribe, and tell us the next person to create a documentary on.